Good evening, everyone. Lovely to see so many familiar faces once again. I am Rachel Joseph, the Director of Children of the Andes. Welcome to our annual project evening. This evening, Duncan, our Head of Programmes, is going to be talking about our work with families, supporting vulnerable children by supporting their families. And we'll be showing a film that looks at the work of Albergue Infantil in Bogotá, which is one of our partners working on this area. For those of you who are regulars to this evening, there is a slight change of format. In recent years, we have brought over our field officers so for them to be able to talk directly to you about the work they do. What we do is we try and incorporate with this event a number of other events. We have a strategic planning session at Children of the Andes over a fortnight. We try and take them out to funders. This year, because times are tough, we've actually decided that we're going to do our strategic planning via Skype, and so they are not, sadly, here with us tonight. We do plan to continue bringing them over, and they will be here again, but we just might not be able to do it every year, which is what we've been trying to do. So before Duncan starts, I just wanted to, for those of you who are new, give you a very quick summary of who we are, and also just give a quick summary of the sort of main highlights of 2012. So, as most of you know, Children of the Andes was established in 1991, following the broadcast of a documentary by Desmond Wilcox, the late journalist, which looked at the plight of street children who were living in the sewers underground in Bogotá. They'd been driven there, pursued by street gangs, by police, and they were literally surviving underground. It was a very shocking story. It shocked the nation, and there were quite literally thousands of people that sent in donations, letters saying, this is terrible, we must stop it. And out of that mobilization came Children of the Andes. Now we have grown to become the largest NGO in the UK, and indeed in Europe, working exclusively in Colombia. We have programs in Bogotá, in Cali, in the Coffee region, and in Cartagena. We're very aware that we have a limited pot of resources, and we obviously seek to maximize the impact of our investment and our work in Colombia. We focus in on the most vulnerable children in Colombia. We focus on issues that we feel aren't being sufficiently addressed. And we work collaboratively. We work collaboratively within our network of partnerships. The partners work very closely together, but we also collaborate with the wider NGO sector in Colombia and with the government as well, to ensure that we're really sharing learning as much as possible. The other way that we try to sort of maximize the long-term impact of our work is to support our partners, to strengthen them in terms of them becoming more sustainable. We have two field officers, one based in Bogotá and one in Cali, and they work closely alongside our partners. We call it a complement. They provide a complement in sort of supporting them with the range of issues they might face, from HR problems, financial management, helping them to access local funding, helping them to get their foot in the door with perhaps a government office. So that whole sort of range of support that's offered through the field office. So in terms of 2012, I'll be honest and say 2012 has actually been a difficult year. The fundraising climate has become much more difficult, much more competitive, and I know that we're not alone in our experience of that. CAF recently issued a report that said half of the NGOs that were polled actually were forced to dip into their reserves this year, and sadly, a sixth of those polled feared that they would go under in 2013. So these are very tough times for NGOs. Despite that, I feel that we've weathered the storm well. We've got a wide range of income streams that we've developed over the course of our existence. We have a good range of businesses that support us, trusts and foundations. We have around 5,000 donors who support us. Many of you here are individual donors who've supported us for many years. So thanks to that support, we have been able to weather the storm. We raised well over £650,000 last year, and due to cost cutting, a bit like the cost cutting we're doing this evening, we've managed to retain our very good expenditure ratios. So 82p in every pound that is donated goes to Colombia, either through grants or through support, through our field office capacity building support. But what's really important is that in 2012 we were able to continue supporting 9 fantastic partnerships. We don't have statistics for the end of the year, but certainly at the mid-year point we had directly supported over 12,000 vulnerable children, young people and families through our partnerships. And through their work, we're helping to drive forward learning, really important learning on issues, and that work really has the potential to impact on the lives of children across the country. That's obviously very crucial. I just want to give you a few details about some of the partnerships. There is so much to talk about and very little time, so do feel free to ask questions in the Q&A session at the end. FFF, the Forming Futures Foundation, many of you may well have heard of. They work specifically supporting the needs of children and young people who are in care or have left care. They are one of the most vulnerable groups of young people in Colombia. Many of them have spent much of their lives in institutions. They have very limited family, if any, that they can rely on for support. And they have had limited ability to really develop the skills that are so crucial to independent living. FFF established the first comprehensive leaving care program in 2004. And when that was established, the needs of care leavers were not recognised by the NGO sector, by the government sector. They weren't really recognised as being an important and large group of young people that had specific needs. FFF, through their work, have given young people in care a platform and a voice. They've put them on the map, and amazingly, in a relatively short period of time, have managed to galvanise a lot of support. In 2011, they worked with the government to help them draft the first guidelines for a national leaving care program, which is phenomenal to have gone in the period of sort of 8-9 years from nothing to plans for a national program. Last year, they liaised very closely, both at local level and at national level, with government, with social services, to push that forward, because it's very, very important that those guidelines become a real live program that is implemented, and they're very aware of that. At national level, with their fellow Children of the Andes partner, Fundamor, they've been liaising with the Director of National Social Services, so real high level, which is phenomenal. They've done extremely well. So we'll be continuing to support them in their work in 2013, and this coming year they hope to start working on supporting children and young people who have been in foster care. They're another group who have absolutely no support in terms of preparation for leaving care currently in Colombia. Corpo Latin is a relatively new partnership, again based in Cali. They operate Colombia's children's helpline. And actually, like many countries in Africa, the usage of mobile phones in Colombia is extremely high. It's very easy to access a mobile phone. You don't have to own one. You can use a mobile phone, get hold of one by street vendors who have their little carts on the side of the street selling fruit and selling food. They often have a whole range of mobile phones that you can use. You can get hold of a mobile phone in cafes, even in bakeries. So it's actually quite an effective way to reach out to vulnerable children, to children who don't perhaps live in city centres and don't have access to the services, who live in those more remote areas outside cities or even in rural areas. So support through a phone line is very effective. Alongside the helpline, Corpo Latin have been working on a prevention programme. which we've been funding. They've been working with schools located in the most marginalized areas of Cali. And within those schools, they've been working with the children and young people who've been selected by teachers as being the most vulnerable children. So children who are at greatest risk of experiencing abuse and violence. So they've been working with those children to help raise awareness of their rights, to help raise awareness of the fact that they're not alone, that there are people and organizations out there that are there to support them, and helping them understand how they can access that support. It's been an incredibly effective program. Over the course of 2012, COTA Latin received over 8,000 calls to its helpline in the Cali region. It worked with over 2,000 children and young people through the prevention program in the schools, and hundreds of those children actually went on to access the helpline, which I think is a really nice indicator of how effective that program is. So we look forward to continuing to work with COTA Latin in 2013. In Bogotá, we actually have developed a new partnership with an organization called Tiempo de Juego. Tiempo de Juego is based in Soacha in the Comuna 4, which is one of the poorest and most marginalized neighborhoods in Colombia. 70% of the inhabitants have been displaced by the conflict. 74% live below the poverty line. It's an area where public services, NGOs are virtually non-existent. You really don't feel the presence of basic services. And children and young people grow up feeling that they're living on the fringes of society, that they are forgotten. They are stigmatized by the very fact that they live in that area. It's very, very difficult for them to find work. And so what happens is many of them don't have skills, they end up hanging out in the streets, and there's a very, very high incidence of violence, and particularly of gang violence. This program was established a few years back by a man who went to Comuna 4 to do a documentary. And on Saturdays, he started hanging out on a piece of wasteland with some of the young people he got to know. And they would get together and just start kicking a football around. And as the weeks went by, more and more children and young people got together. And he realized that there was a real desire amongst those young people to do something fun, to do something positive, to do something together. And the program developed out of that. Now, 2-3 years later, well over 1,000 children and young people are part of that program. The program initially established itself around football, and basically football was used as a way for children and young people to explore different sort of guiding principles, I suppose. It's quite difficult to put it into words. Before and during and after each game of football, the children and young people explore different principles. They might be teamwork, commitment, equality, tolerance, respect, and by discussing and exploring the principle and exploring it in the context of their game and their interaction in the game, the idea is that they internalize this experience and they take it forward in their own lives through school, through the family, and it's been incredibly effective. Alongside that, the program is structured around a monitoring system so that the children and young people with more experience have responsibilities. They are monitors. They help run the program. They help drive the program forward. They feel they have a stake. They feel they have ownership of the program. So it's a very powerful model that has been incredibly successful. The project has managed to gain the support of business. They have linked up with Semana magazine, which for those of you who aren't Colombian is the sort of equivalent of Time magazine, something like that, who offer the children and young people work experience. They have linked up with an organization that offers the children and young people the opportunity to train as physiotherapists, as gym teachers for schools. There's an IT company that's providing support in terms of work experience. They've also linked up, made some really crucial partnerships within the community. They've linked up with the schools, and the schools themselves are taking forward that methodology within the schools. So it's great. What the children are experiencing in the weekends, they're then experiencing in the school environment. So we're going to be working with Tiempo Juego in the coming year. And what we're going to be doing is working on the half day that the children and young people are not at school. School in Colombia is just for half a day. So that half day when they're not at school, children are extremely vulnerable. They're out in the streets, their parents are probably out at work, they have nothing to do, they're kicking around, they're bored. So this program is basically going to be offering them a structured program that actually they have chosen themselves. What the children and young people have said is that they want to now do something different to sport, and the program will focus around drama, performance, music, and it will be a way of the young people having a voice and taking the work that they're doing beyond the community itself into other communities, inviting their family and their friends to get involved and to understand the work they're doing. So it's a very exciting project and one that we'll be focusing on in the coming year. As I said, there is so much news really to give about the projects. I'll probably have to stop there in terms of program news. Other news, we've had some great new people join our team this year. As many of you will probably be aware, we have a new patron, Fernando Montaño, who is a dancer at the Royal Ballet. He was the face of our Christmas appeal, so you may well have seen him there. Fernando came to a promoter meeting about a year ago, which is a meeting of volunteers. And he told his story, how he was born and brought up in Buenaventura, and then he went to Agua Blanca in Cali, which is one of the most difficult areas in Cali. And against all odds, and despite all the prejudices that exist in what is a very, very macho culture, particularly in Agua Blanca, where there is a real gun culture, he pursued his dream of being a ballet dancer. He was lucky because Cali has the only ballet school in Colombia. He got a scholarship to go and study there. He then went on to get a scholarship to go to study in Cuba, and then to La Scala in Milan, and then was spotted there and given an immediate place at the Royal Ballet. So a really inspiring story. He had us all in tears, I have to say, at the meeting when he told his story. It's obviously quite an exceptional story, but we felt that it really embodies what we represent, Children of the Andes, in terms of working with children and young people for them to realise their potential in whatever way it may be. So I think he's a perfect patron for Children of the Andes. He's already been very, very involved. As I say, he was the face of the appeal, and he's organising a very exciting event for us in May, so look out for details on that. After 10 years of service to Children of the Andes, David Maxwell Scott, who was our chair, stood down at the end of last year. And we now have a new chair, Caroline Moser, who is a leading academic in the area of international development. She has a lifetime's experience behind her, which encompasses working directly with communities. Over the period of 10 years, she has lived in a slum community in Ecuador, and has written various books about it, has been on the radio talking about it. Very interesting experience. She's an academic, she's a professor with the universities both here and in the US, and she's worked with international institutions, she's worked with the Ford Foundation, the World Bank, so a really interesting mix of experience. So it's fantastic to have her on board. And she heads up a really strong board of trustees. We have a real mix of experience: international development, business, strategic thinking, child participation. So we're very, very pleased to have such a strong and supportive board. Some of our board members are here this evening, and I thought I might ask them actually to stand up, just so that you can see who they are. Could those board members stand up? There we are. Right, okay. So, just here, all right, oh wow. If you don't mind just standing up just one second, I want to introduce you. So this is Jeremy over here on the bottom right. Jeremy was ambassador in Colombia and has a background in banking as well as government and diplomacy. Mark, next to him, has experience of banking, lifetime's experience of banking. Felipe here is a lawyer. Andres is the head of programs at CAFOD. Julia next to him is an expert on child participation. And Kathy is a leading academic on development in Colombia and gender, and has done some really interesting research on Colombian community here in the UK. So a really interesting and experienced board. Right, okay, I think I'm going to hand over to Duncan now. After Duncan's finished, there will be time for Q&A, and then we'll invite you to have a glass of wine. Okay, thank you.
Right, the usual. So yes, that seems to be working quite well so far. So far so good. Hello, as Rachel says, I'm Duncan. I'm the head of programs at Children of the Andes, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about our work and our partners' work with families and children in Colombia, and then we're going to have a look at a film that's specially commissioned for us on this topic. All children have the right to live in a family. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child says a child should grow up in a family environment, in an atmosphere of love and happiness and understanding. Arguably, that's a platitude and should go without saying. I think it's important, incidentally, that it is said, because it needs to be said, and it's a right which children need help to defend for themselves. Unfortunately, the armed conflict and poverty in Colombia often means that families can struggle to do this, to provide that sort of environment for children. And that is one reason why we at Children of the Andes, with our partners, we work with families and children to help them provide that sort of happy and loving atmosphere, family environment for their children. And when a child is separated from their parents, many of our partners work to try and reunite them with their parents in a safe and permanent way. So there are around 67,000 children in residential care in Colombia. In effect, that means 67,000 children who are not living with their parents. Of course, many of these children are looked after safely by care institutions, and by no means all of these children have families to which they could safely return. Nevertheless, in many cases, it's the experience of our partners that in many cases, if children and families had received the right kind of support, often they would never have got to a situation where a child was separated and taken into care. Again, if a family receives support, the right kind of support, when a child is returning to their care, to their family after having been in care, then many families can provide a safe and caring and loving environment. When many of our partners, as I say, work to help families provide a safe and loving environment. For example, we work with families of children with disabilities in order that families are aware of the rights of their children, and indeed their own, and can provide appropriate care and support for their kids. We work with children of families who are at risk from sexual exploitation, helping their families to keep them safe. We also work with families whose children are involved in child labour to help the families move the child away from work and into education, which is where children should be. In all these cases, families struggle to provide a safe and caring environment for their children for reasons which are usually complex. Lack of resources to provide adequate food and shelter, violence, both within the home and outside of it, which is obviously a key problem in Colombia. The effects of parents' own traumatic experiences, possibly as children themselves, or as a result, as adults, as a result of violence and displacement. Many of these causes don't have easy solutions. But one thing that our partner organisations have found is that whatever external pressures a family is under, pressures which are often beyond their control, like, as I say, the presence of violence in their communities, or a lack of sources of support, sources of employment, there are ways to help strengthen families so that they're more resilient to these pressures and can provide a safer and happier environment for their children. Now, the film, Jen is insistently flashing a sign telling me I have to now show, which I will do, is the story of one family who did just this with the support of the Albergue Infantil Mama Yolanda, which is one of our partner organizations in Bogotá. Now, briefly, the albergue runs a residential care home for boys between 7 and 17 years old who've been living on the streets, have experienced neglect and abuse at home, and often have drug problems. With the help of Children of the Andes, in 2008, they started a program which was to work with the families to ensure that the children could leave residential care, and return to their families safely and permanently. Now, this program has been extremely successful. To put it in context, between 2008 and 2010, more than a third of all the attempts to get children out of care and back with their families in Bogotá failed. In the case of the albergue, practically 100%, 94, 95% of the children, the families with whom they worked to help a child and the family get back together after that child had been living on the streets in great danger and gone into care, after working with the albergue to help the family get back together, as I say, nearly 100% of those families had great success and stayed together longer than a year. That's to say, at the point that they were, as it were, pulled, they were still together after a year. That's not to say that they all immediately broke up again after a year. So in 2011, we secured a grant for with Comic Relief for the albergue to expand this program. And the albergue have now expanded its program into working with children who are still with their families, but are attending daycare centres in order to make sure that the pressures within the family and outside it do not build up to such an extent that the family begins to break apart and a child ends up on the street. So the Ibadamina family, who you're going to see in this film, are one such family. So theirs is a great success, and they're the best people to tell you about it, so that's what they're going to do now.
Como la luna que alumbra por la noche los caminos, como las hojas al viento, como el sol espanta el frío, como la tierra la lluvia, como el mar espera el río, así espero tu regreso a la tierra del olvido.
Nosotros trabajamos, Ariel y yo trabajamos y los niños quedan con Johanna, que era la mayor.
La levantamos, la despertamos a ella. Johanna, esté pendiente de estos niños que no salgan a la calle. Esté pendiente que vayan a hacer la tarea de internet, pero vayan por usted.
Ella se iba a trabajar y le decía a mis hermanos que me hicieran caso. Y me acuerdo que lloré en la radio porque Daniel vivía pegándole a mis hermanos.
Pues los mandaba a levantar y ellos no se levantaban. Y entonces ahí entraba Joana, como que le daba rabia y les daba látigo porque no le hacíamos caso. Y Daniela gritaba así y se daban puños. Nosotros le dijimos a Daniel que ya dejara de pegarle.
Eso era para que eso era una pelea en la vaca, hermano. Que llegábamos nosotros por la tarde de trabajar, por la noche, y eso teníamos queja del uno, queja del otro.
Una vez, cuando yo tenía 10 años, yo me acuerdo que le dije a mi mamá, ella me dijo que no le pegara.
Entonces yo la regañé a ella, que por qué le pegaba a los niños y yo por todo no le pegaba a ella. Entonces ella me dijo, no mamá, pues pregúnteles por qué y ¿sabe qué mamá? Hágase cargo de sus hijos porque yo no los voy a cuidar más, así no se puede.
Mi miedo, si navego en tu mirada, como alerta mi sentido, con tu voz enamorada, con tu sonrisa de mí.
Llegaron las psicólogas y nos dieron opciones, ahora compartimos más en familia.
Ellos nos ayudan a orientarnos, ¿sí? Por lo menos Ariel es una persona, un niño que es rebelde, y entonces ellos nos dan como nos dan una tarea para cada niño, y si no la cumplen, nosotros les cumplimos a ellos, como llevándolos a parque, sacándolos a pasear. Entonces ellos pues, se esmeran por cumplir la tarea que nosotros les colocamos a ellos para salir todos juntos.
Que nos enseñan cosas, nos enseñan a ser juiciosos, nos enseñan juegos a veces. De la actividad que aprendió más es de eso. Que por ejemplo, si yo me porto bien, yo hago lo que tengo que hacer, me ponen puntos y nos ganamos un paseo.
Y Daniel de eso para acá, pues, de lo que le dejamos los puntos, él sabe que tiene que cumplir.
Lo que más me gustaba era lo de las bombas, que si uno se portaba mal, se las explotaba.
Y sobre todo por eso, yo creo que por la estalla de la bomba, no hubo necesidad de estallarlas porque cada uno ya sabía lo que tenía que hacer.
Si mamá y papá no cumplen, nosotros se las explotamos a ellos.
Lo más difícil es que la primera vez primero nos dejaron una tarea aquí y yo llegaba a las 7, 8 de la noche y a mí me decían y yo llegaba y me bañaba y me acostaba, yo decía mañana, y cuando llegaron las 40 horas me cogieron que yo no había hecho nada. Entonces yo la única disculpa que dije es que a mí no me explicaron qué era lo que yo tenía que hacer, pero ahora sí porque el castigo que yo tenía que hacer, levantarme los días domingos a hacer el desayuno, entonces me fui a levantarme 3 domingos.
¿Cómo me robas la calma?
Pues lo más difícil es mejorar, porque uno se acostumbra a lo que ha vivido. Ahora compartimos más en familia.
Ya no peleamos tanto, sí, ahora ya cumplimos las normas, no somos agresivos unos a otros y no decimos groserías.
La fundación me enseñaron que no solamente con correa uno puede educar a los hijos, que antes de castigarlos porque ellos hicieron algo, uno tiene que preguntarles qué les pasa.
Yo me muero, tú tienes la llave de mi corazón. Yo te quiero hasta mi vida porque sin tu amor.
Si las psicólogas no hubieran venido, nosotros seguiríamos iguales, peleando.
Nosotros pensábamos que todo era el oficio y que pues los niños solamente era trabajar para darles la comida, comprarles las cosas del colegio y que lo demás, si tenían la comida y las cosas del colegio, pues que iban a estar bien. Y no es eso. Por ejemplo, allá nos enseñaron a escuchar a los niños, a que ellos digan lo que piensan.
Las cosas han cambiado mucho porque ahora mi mamá está más acá en la casa.
¿Qué me gusta? Que mi mamá está pasando más tiempo con nosotros y estamos saliendo a pasear en familia.
Gracias a todo este apoyo que nos han brindado la institución y a las psicólogas que han venido acá y nos han apoyado mucho, estamos más unidos. Ha sido una familia como un nudo ahora sí. Ya no el uno coge por allá ni el otro busca por el otro lado, sino que salimos juntos. O sea, gracias al apoyo que nos brindó la institución y a las psicólogas, somos una mejor familia.
A mí me gustaría que más familias tuvieran este proceso porque Es bonito que uno cambie de mal a bien.
Llena de mares, llena de montañas, de pájaros, hay de árboles.
Como la luna que alumbra por la noche los caminos, como las hojas al viento, como el sol espanta el frío, como la tierra la lluvia, como el mar espera el río, así espero tu regreso a la tierra del olvido.
Como naufragan mis miedos si navego en tu...
So that's the Barra Mina family. Clearly, Wendy, the eldest child, was put in a position where she had to fulfill adult responsibilities when what she should have been doing is teenage things. So with help from the project, the family were able to sit down together and individually and try and identify what the sources of conflict were, what the problems were that were leading to this difficult conflictive situation, which threatened to, for example, end in more conflict within the home, which may have, say, for example, led one of the boys to leaving the house to escape conflict, which is something which is common, and ending up on the street, and in a cycle which may have ended up in the children being taken into residential care. There'll be an opportunity for you to ask more questions, because there's a lot of things that come out of that film that I realise lots of people will want to ask about. But what I want to do first, before we go into the questions session, is let you hear a bit more from the albergue about what they've learned from their years working with families to try and get families back together with their children. So you're going to hear now from Carolina Morales, who leads the project at the albergue, and she's going to identify some of the important things that the albergue has learned about what are the obstacles to a child returning to their family and a family getting back together after a child has been in care, or even what are the obstacles to a family communicating well and avoiding conflict, which can in turn lead to a child ending up in care.
Como la luna que alumbra por la noche los caminos.
Thank you, Hadi.
Es muy importante poder acompañar esa fase de reintegro postinstitucional, porque el reintegro implica una crisis en la familia por el tema de volverse a acomodar como sistema. Entonces, para el albergue es muy importante poder acompañar, intervenir esa familia en esa fase de acople para tratar de promover que los chicos no vuelvan a las instituciones, que los chicos permanezcan en su casa o que no vuelvan a reincidir en las situaciones que motivaron que entraran a la institución, que no vuelvan a consumir drogas, que no vuelvan a permanecer en la calle, a trabajar en la calle. Esa es como la clave y el motivo por el cual queremos acompañar a esta familia para que siga garantizando el ser protectora y no delegue su función en otras personas o en otras instituciones. Las fortalezas que ha tenido este proyecto es básicamente el poder acompañar a los chicos y a las familias en ese proceso de volverse a acoplar a su dinámica familiar. ¿Por qué es bueno? Porque entiende que no se acaba el proceso cuando el chico vuelve a la casa, sino que volver a la casa es una etapa nueva de ese proceso de intervención familiar. Una fortaleza muy grande es el poder acompañar a las familias sin brindar un apoyo económico, sino el poder acompañar el fortalecimiento de esa dinámica y la reorganización en su cotidianidad, desde el hecho de la hora de levantarse, de la hora de ir a la escuela, de la hora de hacer las tareas, de quién manda en la casa, porque mientras los chicos están en las instituciones, quien tiene la autoridad somos los profesionales que estamos aquí vinculados. Cuando los chicos vuelven a casa, los padres tienen nuevamente que recobrar ese rol de autoridad. Entonces hacemos ese acompañamiento en poderlos empoderar.
So, one of the things that the albergue has learnt, one of the crucial things over the years, and which is borne out by findings from other reunification programs in other countries, is that it's important to view the family as a system in which what happens to one member of the family affects all the other members. And therefore to work with only one member, say a child who's been on the street and has been taken into care, to work with only one member is likely to be ineffective. And when that member returns to the family, if the family itself has not worked together to change the way it functions, to change the circumstances in which the child was ejected from the family in the first place, then that intervention, I say, is likely to be ineffective. So what are some of the other difficulties that a family faces and a child faces when a child is returning to a family after a period of being in care, or when a child is still with their family but is in a situation of conflict which could lead to a child ending up away, separated from their family?
Otra adicional es la ruptura del esquema de niño institucionalizado. El volver a la casa implica volverse a relacionar con los niños de la cuadra, con los niños del colegio. Entonces es también importante el que los niños se vuelvan a sentir como a gusto con ese rol, en el que ya no están tan protegidos como cuando están en la institución. Generalmente en la institución, al menos en el albergue, todos los niños institucionalizados van al mismo colegio. Entonces, estar identificados como niños del albergue los protege. Cuando ya llegan a la escuela normal, ya es un niño más dentro de la dinámica. Entonces, poder acompañar también ese proceso de acople a esa dinámica, creo que es un logro muy importante.
So, as I've said, residential care provides a safe, if not always ideal, environment for many children in Colombia. And many of our partners, not only the albergue, see supporting children and young people when they leave care as absolutely crucial. This can be a daunting and dangerous time, whether children are going back to live with their families or whether they're going to establish their own independent lives at the age of 18. In all these cases, our partners have found that life in care can leave children unprepared for life after care. And one of the reasons for this is the way in which, in care, children are provided with things that families and indeed young people, when they leave to live independent lives after care, cannot possibly provide.
Que definitivamente la situación del país en términos de la condición económica de muchas de las familias es una dificultad para la fase de acople, porque las familias no tienen la posibilidad de garantizar algunas cosas que en la institución sí están garantizadas gracias al apoyo que brinda el Estado. Entonces, en la institución los niños siempre tienen, por ejemplo, carne en sus comidas, quizás en la casa no siempre la hay. En la institución siempre hay todos los materiales para hacer las tareas, en casa no siempre las hay. Entonces la condición económica es una dificultad para acoplarse, porque desde luego de manera natural todos buscamos tener unas condiciones mínimas de comodidad, y los chicos sí terminan poniendo como en una balanza, bueno, allá tenía todo, me daban todo, aquí tengo algunas carencias económicas.
So, if families can't provide the material comforts that children can get in care, is this a problem? Is it better that children should be kept away from their families because their families are suffering material hardship? They can't provide what children get in care. The albergue has a clear answer to this question.
También es muy importante el tema de cuáles son esas condiciones, porque si vamos a mirar solo la parte económica, como lo decía hace un momento, el contexto de la situación económica de las familias pues no es muy fácil. Entonces, si vamos a medir que el niño tenga una cama, tenga una habitación, tenga la escuela, no siempre. Lo más importante sería poder mirar para ese reintegro que la familia esté consciente de su papel frente al cuidado y la protección de ese chico, que también implica desde luego un tema de regulación de las conductas del muchacho, la orientación del comportamiento de esa niña o de ese muchacho.
So, in common with the experience of family reunification programs in other parts of Latin America, the albergue feel and have learnt that the most important element in the success of a child's return to their family, or as I say, in strengthening a family when a child is at risk within that family, is not material needs, is not helping them with their material needs alone, so much as the commitment and capacity of the family to provide a caring and loving environment. And I think very importantly, this reflects what children on our partners' projects say, that what they most describe as their greatest hardships are not material want. What children most often refer to when they're talking about things they would like to change in their lives is the deprivation of emotional support, of safety, of recognition within their families. So Carolina also goes on to say that a child can return to their family even before they're enrolled in school, which in some ways some people might find surprising, but I think this is an important element of the project, because one of the things that it aims to do is to help families claim the rights of their children for themselves without the support of the albergue. So what's important is that the albergue works with the family to make sure that they know how to get their child enrolled in school, or they know and have the confidence to get medical attention when it's needed, and that is their right. Child labour. This is obviously a major threat to a child's welfare, and many of the children that the albergue works with are at risk from work. Another key lesson that the albergue has learnt is that it's very important to engage with the whole family about their beliefs on the value of a child going out to work. And Carolina has interesting things to say about this.
Con el trabajo infantil, a partir de todas las creencias culturales que se tienen en torno a eso, sí es muy frecuente que haya reincidencia, porque la gente sigue creyendo en el tema de que a partir del trabajo es la única manera en que se forman los valores. Personalmente creo que sí permite formar los valores, pero creo que no es la única manera, y creo que la infancia no es el tiempo propicio para trabajar. Entonces, ese tipo de creencias sí sostienen mucho que el niño vuelva al trabajo. El acompañamiento postinstitucional permite que monitoreemos un poco más ese proceso y que orientemos a la familia para entender también que aunque pueda transmitir valores importantes del trabajo, también expone a otras situaciones que no son consecuentes con el momento de vida que tengan los chicos. Mientras que un niño debe estar jugando fútbol en la tarde después de hacer tareas, no debe estar en una esquina vendiendo dulces.
So, briefly, there are some of the important lessons that the albergue has learnt about how best to support families and children together. With your support and the support of Comic Relief, we're helping the albergue share these lessons with institutions in Colombia and elsewhere to make sure that more families find it easier to provide the sort of care and support that children need. I'm going to play you one final insight from the albergue. Families that come to their program are labelled by social services as problem families, as vulnerable families. But one of the things that the albergue stresses is the importance of focusing not on the family's problems, but on the family's strengths, on the family's resources. The project has found, by working with the families, that not only, as I said right at the beginning, can a so-called problem family, with the proper support, actually provide a loving and caring home for their children, even in the context of many hardships. But they can actually also discover that they can be of great support to other families in similar situations.
El albergue crea profundamente en el tema de que a partir de la red social se configura la identidad de la familia. La familia es en la medida en que está en un entorno que la convierte en unidad. Entonces creemos que el tema de las redes sociales le permite a la familia fortalecerse, no solamente en el tema de recibir apoyo, subsidios, servicios de entidades, sino en el tema de comprenderse como una unidad social. Entonces, en esa medida, nuestro trabajo en redes trasciende de que la familia acceda a salud, a educación, a justicia, a que la familia también se entienda como red de otros. Entonces, es muy importante que yo deje de verme como el pobre, vulnerado, que las instituciones quizás sin querer hemos transmitido durante muchos años, a entender que aunque yo tenga una dificultad económica, yo puedo ser red de mi vecina, si un día le cuido el niño. Puedo ser red de mi mamá si la acompaño al médico, puedo ser red de mi hermana si un día le presto de mi arroz y compartimos el arroz. Entonces, cuando yo ya me entiendo como red de otro, yo ya dejo de ser el vulnerable, perjudicado, a ser parte de un sistema en el que necesito de los otros, pero también le aporto a los otros. Entonces, para nosotros es muy importante que ellos se puedan concebir de esa manera, que puedan entender que su red social empieza por la familia, sigue por los vecinos, por los amigos, por la comunidad y por último estamos las instituciones. Es un poco la filosofía de romper con la cadena de la pobreza, de que como soy pobre necesito de ayuda. No, tengo unas dificultades económicas y desde luego hago uso de la ayuda, pero no me quedo en la concepción de víctima de la condición económica.
So, that's the family. And that's the project. It's now, I think we've got some time to answer questions. We're all here. Well, many of us at Children of the Andes are here. Some of us are in Colombia. And many of our trustees are here as well. So I think what we're going to do now is take a few questions. It can be questions about the film, about the program which I've mostly talked about, questions about our work with families more generally, or questions about any other aspect of our work. So please feel free to shout
out. Rachel started talking about the difficulty of the current situation in fundraising. Yeah. I'm sure you've probably done this, Rachel, already, knowing how you go at things. But having Comic Relief supporting this particular program and it lasting over a 3-year period. Yeah. Have you managed to get it featured on the television or to think about getting a celebrity to go out and visit the program to highlight? Because Colombia doesn't have the highest profile in the United Kingdom. And normally the projects in Africa or elsewhere tend to be highlighted. I don't know whether you've managed to get your foot in the door, and which would help your profile and help fundraising.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I mean, it is actually something we should look into. I'm not sure to what degree organisations can push their own agenda. I think they kind of have their own agenda. But it will be good. That's a very good point, and I will look into it. Generally, in the past, we have struggled with getting organisations like Comic Relief to go to Colombia because of the security issues and. you know, the costs around insurance and stuff like that. So it generally is quite a struggle to get, you know, film crews out there. But yes, we should think about that and contact them and find out. Yeah, Comet Relief is in a big moment of change right now. There's a lot going on, so we'll wait for things to settle down, and then that's a good point. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions?
There's one very serious question that I think I can answer, is how can we increase our fundraising? And this is from an experiment I did with a charity some time ago. And the system is, if those of us who speak Spanish could write a selection of poetry, and then we could put it together in a book for sale in Colombia, that could probably sell very, very well indeed. And this is something we did in London, and it proved extremely successful. So perhaps there might be a way forward.
Thank you, Andrew. That's a lovely idea. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of these things, the money that's raised, it all adds up to a lot of money. And actually, around half of the income that we raise every year comes from initiatives like that, individuals going out, doing stuff, raising money in different ways, whether it's through their own individual fundraising efforts or getting their churches or schools on board. So yes, absolutely. Sounds a good idea. I'll talk to you about that idea.
Hi, I'm very new, so I don't know a lot about Children of the Andes. I just want to know, do you support the foundations in Colombia only by funding, only by giving them money, or do you give them more support, sending people to teach them, or with experience and based on other charities?
As I mentioned when I spoke earlier, we support them through grants, but we also support them through helping them to become stronger and more sustainable organizations. We have 2 field offices, one based in Bogota and one in Cali, and they spend all their days, every day, working alongside all of our partners. So they provide support in any areas that the partners might need it. Some need support in monitoring and evaluation, you know, better understanding what impact the work they're doing is having, and filtering that back into their sort of planning for the future. Some have big weaknesses on basic sort of administration and financial systems. Others desperately need to sort of start accessing more funding locally. And by being an international organisation, we can sometimes help them get that crucial first meeting with a local funder. So we might accompany them to the first meeting, and then beyond that, they can fly. So yeah, we do work very closely with all our partners. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to pick up the topic of child labour, because while I fully share the ideal that children should enjoy their childhood and be able to play and go to school and live in a loving family, I know from experience in the field that very often families are dependent in part on the income that children can generate for the family, or a contribution in terms of labour, particularly, for example, in rural areas where children may be expected to participate in all sorts of things, whether it's something as simple as shelling peanuts or participating in a harvest. How far do you, or does the albergue, make sure that as you try to persuade people that their children should not be working, that the family will be able to manage without that sort of contribution?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Dermot. I think it's fair to say that in the case of many of the families with whom our partners have worked, it's quite rare that in real terms a child's economic contribution to the family is significant. And I think what our partners would say is that the dangers inherent in working, and often the work that children do is perilous, you know, on the street, unaccompanied, often shading into exposure to commercial sexual exploitation, working at night, etc. And added to that, the implications of them, by definition, if they're working, not going to school, those dangers, those risks outweigh any benefit that that their economic activity could bring to the family. And also, I think the film was an example, in a way, of what the dangers of prioritizing material needs, however important they are, over sort of the social and psychological well-being of a family, and indeed the functioning, the practical functioning of a family. And so all those things put together, I would say, in most cases, make a strong argument against the idea. Not, I'm no means, you know, definitive about this, but I would say in most cases make a strong argument against the idea of that child labour is, on the whole, beneficial to the family unit. But your question was actually, of course, about persuading families that this is the case. And I think in almost all cases where our partners have been successful in doing this, it's about trust. It's about the project workers not lecturing, not saying, you're abusing your child by sending them out to work, you must do this. It's at all, that's absolutely not the approach that our partners take. It's about understanding that the specific conditions of a given family, which are always very difficult, and trying to help the family communicate better, function better, and work out their own problems, which often, as you say, are economic as well as everything else. And I think there's a very important point that for me comes out of, which I'm glad you touched upon, for me comes out of this project, and many of our other projects, sorry, I'm going to go on as I often do, when they appear to be concentrating on issues which, as Carolina Morales said explicitly in the film, are not economic. We support these families without giving them economic support. That does not imply that economics and material resources are not important to a family. I think it's very important to bear in mind. The strength of this project, to my mind, is, as I said, that it can strengthen families and give them resilience in the face of other external material hardships that they're facing, but also enable them to better overcome those hardships. But it's not enough. Working with a psychologist for 6 months with your family is not going to solve your poverty. Poverty, the effects of poverty are psychological and emotional and social, of course, and maybe many of the causes of poverty are. But poverty is also caused by political structures. Poverty is caused by economic structures. Poverty is caused by inequality. No amount on their own of projects like the Albergue are going to solve poverty in Colombia. Poverty in Colombia is also an economic problem. It's also a problem of equality. It's also a political problem. But supporting families to take control of their lives and enabling them to participate in their communities in a way which is constructive and powerful, which this project does, is, I think, an important step towards helping families also get involved constructively in solving the political and the economic problems of Colombia.
Can I just add something very quickly as well, just directly back to your question about child labour? And one of the other big risks is, particularly with child labour in an urban environment where there are I think, many more risks, is that children will drop out of education. A very, very high proportion of children that work drop out of education, and obviously that has an enormous impact on their future and their opportunities to emerge from poverty. We've been working for many years with COTA, which is the YMCA in Colombia, on working with specifically children with experience of child labour and getting them back into the education system. And we know that that is a very, very big risk. And actually, in terms of persuading families, parents, that they should support their children to go back to education and not work, when often the parents themselves didn't go to school and worked as children, it's with that argument that actually if they go to school and they get qualifications, they will end up being able to do better paid, safer work, and actually the longer term bring in much more money to their family. And then just your point about the rural context, yes, absolutely. We support a project in called La Rayuela, which is in the coffee region, and there some children do work. When it's the coffee harvest, they will work, but work alongside their family. So it's work where they are always accompanied by their family and limited hours. So yes, absolutely, that's supported. Good.
What is the criteria for families to belong to the albergue, or how does the albergue spot families at risk? That's that's one question, and then Doña Gloria, the second question is she wanted to know if there are plans to work with comunas in Medellin. So.
Right, well, I'll tackle the first question. All the families that work with the albergue are referred by social services. So, and this is interesting. This is partly why Carolina referred to them, all these families being labelled as vulnerable families, problem families, because that is, in her understanding of things, the way that social services works. And one of their difficulties with social services is just this, that families are almost undermined from the beginning by being labelled as problem families that are being referred to them, to the albergue by social services. But yes, that's how they come to the project. Now, Medellin, we only work at the moment we work mainly in Cali and Bogota. We actually do now have partners in Cartagena, one partner, and one partner in Chinchina. But as we were saying earlier, the way we work is we want to work very closely with our partners, which means we need to be where our partners are. We don't have anybody working in Medellin at the moment. So really, it's a practical reason rather than a decision based on need. There are many good organisations, excellent organisations that we could work with in Medellin, but we simply don't have the resources to be there as well.
Well, I have one question and one point. My question is, according with the video, the mom, has more time to share with the family. If it's no economical support, how she can have more time now than before? After I can do my point.
This is a very good question, and one which I have actually tried to find out more about, because it's a question I had as well. So it must be a good question, obviously. That's not what I meant to reply. But now you come think of it, yeah, it is a good. I think part of the answer so I don't know, actually, the extent to which it means that Lucei is working less out of the home. I don't know how much that is true, or whether it means she is prioritising her time to be able to spend more time in the home, and her economic activities outside the home have lessened. So the answer is I don't know. What I suspect is the case in cases like this is that rebalancing of priorities within the home is something that the family comes to through the support of the project. I.e., they see, as the family very eloquently described, they see the value to the family and to the children and to all their welfare as a family of not simply prioritising an extra 10,000 pesos, even though they're obviously important, but prioritising the way the family communicates, the roles within the family, who is responsible for what within the family. Wendy, the 14-year-old girl, is not responsible for looking after her younger siblings, and that was identified by the family as their most pressing problem. Not that they were struggling with the amount of income coming into the household, which nevertheless, no doubt, they also are. So that's not quite a proper answer to your question, but I think that some of it is in there.
And I have two kind of commercial comments. Once on Sunday was a really good. Monday was a really good program about Colombia, South American lost treasures. So it was very good because they show the culture about muiscas and the tirones. I don't know, it will be a possibility to raise money if Children of the Andes just take permission of the BBC to bring that and as a excuse to see a different Colombia.
Yeah. Really interesting idea.
And the second idea is Juan Gabriel Vázquez, the writer. He lives in Barcelona and he just launched a new book. And I don't know how, it just came to my mind because I got the book for another media. I think there will be another opportunity to bring a Colombian that is very involved to be an ambassador of good Colombia. And the book is very good, and I can give the details. But I think it's kind to promote some ideas because the community is very mixed, and there are a lot of British with Colombians. Yeah. And people go to that and pay 10, 15 pounds happy. Yeah. Good. Just copy the ideas with the competencies.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Great, some great ideas.
So Jen is holding up a sign saying stop.
Okay.
I think that's what it says. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Good. Right.
Well,
do you want to say something?
No, you wrap up.
Sorry, we do a bit of a double act here. So yeah, thank you all for coming. As usual, I'll finish the evening by saying that all of this costs money. We can't do it without your support. So please don't stop supporting us. These are very, very tough times, and we will continue being able to support this amazing work if you continue to support us. So please don't forget us. There's lots of different ways you can support us, and we have various events coming up over the next few months that were highlighted on the PowerPoint. On the 16th of February, we have a meeting of our COTA promoters, which is a network of volunteers that come together to do sort of fundraising work, to organise their own events, get their friends and family engaged, and support us in events like this. So if you're interested in joining our Children of the Andes COTA Promoter network, then please do come along. The meeting's on the 16th of February. We're also organising a 10K run in March, so if you fancy challenging yourself, then do sign up for that. It's a great way to fundraise. And we have our Thames Walk, our annual walk in May, on May 11th, so look out for that and please do come along. Right, well, I think it's time to go and enjoy a glass of wine. But before we do, I just wanted everyone to give a round of applause to Heidi. Oh no, she's disappeared, I think. Who did a phenomenal job, organising the event, and to Duncan for his great speech. So, thank you.